Diary of a Young Girl. Words and meanings. 1. Posthumously, after death. 2. Holocaust, the systematic persecution and extermination of Jews and others by the Nazi regime during World War II. 3. Musings, casual, aimless thoughts. 4. Chin in my hands, sitting with your hands under your chin, often indicating boredom or deep thought. 5. Stiff-backed notebook, a notebook with a rigid cover. 6. Grandly, in a proud or exaggerated manner. 7. Prompted, encouraged or inspired. About the author. Annalise Marie, Annie, Frank, the 12th of June 1929, February or March 1945, was of Jewish origin. One of the most discussed Jewish victims of the Holocaust, she gained fame posthumously with the publication of the Diary of a Young Girl, in which she documents her life in hiding from 1942 to 1944, during the German occupation of the Netherlands in World War II. Q1. What was Annie Frank's origin? A1. Annie Frank was of Jewish origin. Q2. What is Annie Frank famous for? A2. Annie Frank is famous for her diary, The Diary of a Young Girl. Anne's feelings about writing. Writing in a diary is a really strange experience for someone like me. Not only because I've never written anything before, but also because it seems to me that later on neither I nor anyone else will be interested in the musings of a 13-year-old schoolgirl. Q3. Why does Annie think writing in a diary is strange? A3. Annie thinks writing in a diary is strange because she's never written before and doesn't think anyone will be interested in her thoughts. Q4. What motivates Annie to write in a diary? A4. Annie feels the need to express herself and get things off her chest. Anne's inspiration for writing. Oh well, it doesn't matter. I feel like writing, and I have an even greater need to get all kinds of things off my chest. Paper has more patience than people. I thought of this saying on one of those days when I was feeling a little depressed and was sitting at home with my chin in my hands, bored and listless, wondering whether to stay in or go out. Q5. What phrase inspires Annie to write? A5. The phrase, paper has more patience than people, inspires Annie to write. Q6. How was Annie feeling when she thought of this phrase? A6. Annie was feeling depressed, bored, and listless. Anne's diary. I finally stayed where I was, brooding. Yes, paper does have more patience, and since I'm not planning to let anyone else read the stiff-backed notebook grandly referred to as a diary, unless I should ever find a real friend, it probably won't make a bit of difference. Q7. Why does Annie call her notebook stiff-backed? A7. Annie calls her notebook stiff-backed because it has a rigid cover. Q8. Who does Annie plan to share her diary with? A8. Annie only plans to share her diary with a real friend, if she ever finds one. Anne's loneliness. Now I'm back to the point that prompted me to keep a diary in the first place. I don't have a friend. Let me put it more clearly, since no one will believe that a 13-year-old girl is completely alone in the world. And I'm not. Q9. Why does Annie start keeping a diary? A9. Annie starts keeping a diary because she feels lonely and doesn't have a true friend. Q10. Does Annie have friends and family? A10. Yes, Annie has loving parents, a sister, and about 30 people she can call friends. Anne's relationships. I have loving parents and a 16-year-old sister, and there are about 30 people I can call friends. I have a family, loving aunts and a good home. No, on the surface I seem to have everything, except my one true friend. All I think about when I'm with friends is having a good time. Q11. What does Annie lack in her relationships? A11. Annie lacks a true friend with whom she can share her thoughts and feelings. Q12. How does Annie feel when she's with friends? A12. Annie only thinks about having a good time when she's with friends.
Feelings with someone. 2. Emigrated, moved to a new country. 3. Plunged, suddenly started doing something. 4. Heartbreaking, extremely sad. 5. Jot down, to write something quickly and briefly, usually as a note or reminder. Starting the diary. I can't bring myself to talk about anything but ordinary everyday things. We don't seem to be able to get any closer, and that's the problem. Maybe it's my fault that we don't confide in each other. In any case, that's just how things are, and unfortunately they're not liable to change. This is why I've started the diary. To enhance the image of this long-awaited friend in my imagination, I don't want to jot down the facts in this diary the way most people would do, but I want the diary to be my friend, and I'm going to call this friend, Kitty. Since no one would understand a word of my stories to Kitty if I were to plunge right in, I'd better provide a brief sketch of my life, much as I dislike doing so. Q1. Why did the author start the diary? A1. The author started the diary because she couldn't confide in others and wanted a friend to share her thoughts with. Q2. What does the author want the diary to be? A2. The author wants the diary to be her friend, which she calls Kitty. Family background. My father, the most adorable father I've ever seen, didn't marry my mother until he was 36 and she was 25. My sister, Margot, was born in Frankfurt in Germany in 1926. I was born on the 12th of June 1929. I lived in Frankfurt until I was 4. My father emigrated to Holland in 1933. My mother, Edith Hollander Frank, went with him to Holland in September, while Margot and I were sent to Aachen to stay with our grandmother. Margot went to Holland in December, and I followed in February, when I was plunked down on the table as a birthday present for Margot. Q3. How old were the author's parents when they got married? A3. The author's father was 36 and mother was 25 when they got married. Q4. Where was the author born? A4. The author was born in Frankfurt, Germany. Education and family events. I started right away at the Montessori Nursery School. I stayed there until I was 6, at which time I started in the first form. In the 6th form my teacher was Mrs. Kuparas, the headmistress. At the end of the year we were both in tears as we said a heartbreaking farewell. In the summer of 1941 Grandma fell ill and had to have an operation, so my birthday passed with little celebration. Q5. Where did the author start school? A5. The author started school at the Montessori Nursery School. Q6. What happened to the author's grandmother in 1941? A6. The author's grandmother fell ill and had to have an operation in 1941.
DS and meanings. 1. Quaking, shaking with fear or anxiety. 2. Forthcoming, about to happen. 3. Unpredictable, impossible to predict. 4. Fogey, an old-fashioned or conservative person. 5. Ramble, to talk or write in a confused or aimless way. 6. Incorrigible, impossible to correct or reform. 7. Ingenuity, cleverness or inventiveness. Family and diary. Grandma died in January 1942. No one knows how often I think of her and still love her. This birthday celebration in 1942 was intended to make up for the other, and Grandma's candle was lit along with the rest. The four of us are still doing well, and that brings me to the present date of the 20th of June 1942, and the solemn dedication of my diary. Q1. When did Grandma die? A1. Grandma died in January 1942. Q2. Why was the birthday celebration in 1942 special? A2. The celebration was special because it was intended to make up for the previous one, and Grandma's candle was lit along with the rest. School and teachers. Dearest Kitty, our entire class is quaking in its boots. The reason, of course, is the forthcoming meeting in which the teachers decide who'll move up to the next form and who'll be kept back. Q3. Why is the class anxious? A3. The class is anxious because of the upcoming meeting where teachers will decide who will move up to the next form and who will be kept back. Q4. What is the author's attitude towards her teachers? A4. The author thinks teachers are unpredictable. School and classmates. Half the class is making bets. GN and I laugh ourselves silly at the two boys behind us, CN and Jacques, who have staked their entire holiday savings on their bet. From morning to night, it's, you're going to pass. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. No, I'm not. Even G's pleading glances and my angry outbursts can't calm him down. If you ask me, there are so many dummies that about a quarter of the class should be kept back, but teachers are the most unpredictable creatures on earth. Q5. What are the classmates doing? A5. Half the class is making bets on who will pass and who will be kept back. Q6. How does the author feel about her classmates? A6. The author thinks some of her classmates are dummies. School and studies. I'm not so worried about my girlfriends and myself. We'll make it. The only subject I'm not sure about is maths. Anyway, all we can do is wait. Until then, we keep telling each other not to lose heart. Q7. What subject is the author worried about? A7. The author is worried about maths. Q8. How does the author feel about her chances of passing? A8. The author is confident that she and her girlfriends will pass. Teachers and relationships. I get along pretty well with all my teachers. There are 9 of them, 7 men and 2 women. Mr. Keesing, the old fogey who teaches maths, was annoyed with me for ages because I talked so much. Q9. How does the author get along with her teachers? A9. The author gets along pretty well with all her teachers. Q10. Why was Mr. Keesing annoyed with the author? A10. Mr. Keesing was annoyed because the author talked too much. School and homework. After several warnings, he assigned me extra homework. An essay on the subject, a chatterbox. A chatterbox. What can you write about that? I'd worry about that later, I decided. I jotted down the title in my notebook, tucked it in my bag and tried to keep quiet. Q11. What did Mr. Keesing assign the author? A11. Mr. Keesing assigned the author an essay on the subject, a chatterbox. Q12. How did the author feel about the assignment? A12. The author didn't know what to write about and decided to worry about it later. Writing and ideas. That evening, after I'd finished the rest of my homework, the note about the essay caught my eye. I began thinking about the subject while chewing the tip of my fountain pen. Anyone could ramble on and leave big spaces between the words, but the trick was to come up with convincing arguments to prove the necessity of talking. Q13. What did the author start thinking about? A13. The author started thinking about the subject of the essay, a chatterbox. Q14. What was the author trying to do? A14. The author was trying to come up with convincing arguments to prove the necessity of talking. Writing and ideas. I thought, and suddenly I had an idea. I wrote the 3 pages Mr. Keesing had assigned me and was satisfied. I argued that talking is a student's trait and that I would do my best to keep it under control, but that I would never be able to cure myself of the habit since my mother talked as much as I did, if not more, and that there's not much you can do about inherited traits. Q15. What did the author come up with? A15. The author came up with an idea to argue that talking is a student's trait and that it's an inherited trait. Q16. What did the author say about their mother? A16. The author said that their mother talked as much as they did, if not more. School and homework. Mr. Keesing had a good laugh at my arguments, but when I proceeded to talk my way through the next lesson, he assigned me a second essay. This time it was supposed to be on an incorrigible chatterbox. Q17. How did Mr. Keesing react to the author's essay? A17. Mr. Keesing had a good laugh at the author's arguments. Q18. What did Mr. Keesing assign the author next? A18. Mr. Keesing assigned the author a second essay on an incorrigible chatterbox. School and homework. I handed it in, and Mr. Keesing had nothing to complain about for 2 whole lessons. However, during the 3rd lesson he'd finally had enough. Anne Frank, as punishment for talking in class, write an essay entitled, Quack, 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 said Mistress Chatterbox. Q19. What did Mr. Keesing assign the author next? A19. Mr. Keesing assigned the author an essay entitled, Quack, 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 said Mistress Chatterbox, as punishment for talking in class. Q20. How did the author feel about the assignment? A20. The author didn't mention their feelings, but they accepted the challenge and wrote the essay. Writing and friendship. My friend, Sana, who's good at poetry, offered to help me write the essay from beginning to end in verse, and I jumped for joy. Mr. Keesing was trying to play a joke on me with this ridiculous subject, but I'd make sure the joke was on him. Q21. Who helped the author write the essay? A21. The author's friend Sana helped them write the essay. Q22. How did the author feel about Sana's offer? A22. The author was joyful and accepted the offer. Writing and creativity. I finished my poem, and it was beautiful. It was about a mother duck and a father swan with 3 baby ducklings who were bitten to death by the father because they quacked too much. Q23. What was the author's poem about? A23. The author's poem was about a mother duck, a father swan, and 3 baby ducklings. Q24. What happened to the baby ducklings? A24. The baby ducklings were bitten to death by the father because they quacked too much. School and teacher. Luckily, Mr. Keesing took the joke the right way. He read the poem to the class, adding his own comments, and to several other classes as well. Since then, I've been allowed to talk and haven't been assigned any extra homework. On the contrary, Mr. Keesing's always making jokes these days. Q25. How did Mr. Keesing react to the author's poem? A25. Mr. Keesing took the joke the right way and read the poem to the class with his own comments. Q26. What changed after the author's poem? A26. The author was allowed to talk and wasn't assigned extra homework, and Mr.